All Indiana Politics is your premier source for Indiana politics, focusing on issues that matter to you.
I still want us to be the best in the Midwest.
We can't afford another lockdown.
Give the citizens of this country the relief they need.
Education in the state of Indiana remains priority number one.
In-depth, nonpartisan coverage.
We don't know exactly where the economy will be in January.
People are worried with good reason.
Exclusive interviews with Indiana's political leaders.
We have the resources here in the state of Indiana to care for those who are in need.
Expert analysis on critical legislation.
We need to reform those laws.
This recovery is going to take some time.
We've got to anticipate that there'll be a budget shortfall.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Now, from Wish TV, your local news source, this is All Indiana Politics.
Good morning and welcome to All Indiana Politics. I'm Garrett Bergquist, in for Phil Sanchez. Iran was on the verge of enriching enough uranium for a nuclear bomb. That's the message from Israel's Consul General to the Midwest, Yanam Cohen. Cohen met with Indiana political leaders this week, as well as members of Indiana's Jewish community. He stopped by our studios to talk to our Phil Sanchez.
Consul General, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
Let's start with the U.S. bombing of Iran's nuclear site. Okay, so take me through that. Where were you and your thoughts on all that transpired?
You know, we started an operation 2 weeks ago against Iran because of really growing threat, I would say double existential threat on Israel from Iran. This is something that we've been following for maybe 20 years now, but in recent months we felt that I would say the extent and the timeline for these threats is really becoming very, very significant. The first part of that is the Iranian nuclear ambitions. You know, they have been enriching uranium for many years now. We know that. But what happened over the past months is that we got growing indications to the fact that they might be on the verge of actually weaponizing their enriched uranium. In other words, building their first nuclear bomb. And this is a huge threat, not only to Israel, by the way, but to the whole Middle East, and I would say globally. And the second part of that is their ambitions to build up their ballistic missile arsenal. You know, right now we saw the damage of them, you know, launching missiles towards Israel, significant damage. Imagine what could have happened if they had 10 or 20 times more missiles than they have now. That was their ambition. And by the way, they were working on developing also intercontinental missiles, meaning missiles capable of hitting not only Israel and the Middle East, but also Europe and the United States. This is a huge global danger.
Reading the tea leaves here, you believe that this was a success?
The American operation in Israel, absolutely, because, you know, I would say that we had three major accomplishments. The first one is the fact that Israel could operate pretty much freely in Iranian airspace. The second one is that we were able to target both their nuclear and missile sites on Iranian ground. And the third one is that we were able to intercept the vast majority of the missiles that they have launched towards Israel. And we did it not only by, you know, the technology, the very advanced technology, the missile defense systems that we have, but also thanks to the global partnership that we've had with the United States, but also with some of our Arab neighbors. And then came President Trump and said, hey, you did a great job, but I want to make sure that they're never able to go back to what they aspired before, that they're never able to build their nuclear bomb. And then came the American operation, which was a huge success. And I really hope that that would be a turning point in the Middle East, that Iran would understand that the path that they have taken over the past 20 years of not only building nuclear and missile power, but also, you know, really sending proxy terrorist organizations all across the Middle East to destabilize not only Israel, but also many Arab countries, that this path is no longer valid, and they would seriously engage in peace conversations with the United States.
Is Israel committed to the ceasefire?
We are 100% committed to the ceasefire. And I would say more than that. Our hope now is that following the, I would say, great success of neutralizing the threat from Iran, and this is exactly what President Trump is trying to do now, is to leverage this success to enhance peace in the Middle East. So what we're talking about is potentially a deal that would bring about an end to the ongoing war in Gaza that has caused so much suffering, both to Israelis and Palestinians. We want to see an end to the Hamas terrorist regime in Gaza. We want to see the release of the hostages. This is what's being discussed right now. And at the same time, we also want to see some enhancement of the Abraham Accords. These are the peace agreements that President Trump brought 4 years ago. And our hope now is that more Arab countries in the Middle East will join the circle of peace with Israel.
You have been meeting with political leaders here in Indiana as well as members of the Jewish community. How have those meetings gone?
Great. I met with Governor Brown this morning. He's been a great friend of Israel for many years, and what we discussed today is the potential of enhancing even further the partnership between Israel and the Hoosier state. We have had very deeply established business and academic partnerships here in Indiana, from agriculture to solar technology to pharmaceutical, and we want to explore more venues for even deeper partnership. I also invited the governor to visit in Israel as soon as he can to not only meet with our political leadership, but also to further explore the potential for enhancing our partnership.
Tell me about the attacks that Iran launched on Israel, and were any of your family members affected by that?
Oh, absolutely. And this is exactly the difference between what Israel did and what the Iranians did. Because when we launched the operation in Iran, we limited ourselves only to military and strategic sites on Iranian soil. On the other hand, the Iranians deliberately attacked Israeli civil population centers. They launched ballistic missiles towards Tel Aviv and other cities in Israel. I can say that the physical damage is quite significant. Almost 30 people got killed. Many houses were destroyed. Thousands of Israelis are now homeless because their homes were destroyed by the Iranian missiles. So I cannot say that the impact was not significant, but for me, this is really a very good example or reflection of why our operation was so important, because if they were able to cause so much damage in the very limited power they have now, imagine what they could do in a year or two if they were able to reach their ambitions on having a nuclear bomb and more ballistic missiles.
Members of the Israeli government, some of them have called for a change in government leadership in Iran. Where do you stand on that?
This is something that the Iranian people should do, and I really hope they're able to do it. The Iranian people, which is a wonderful, amazing people with 3,000 years of history, has had over the past 55 years, since 79, 45 years, a dictatorship, and really a religious, theological dictatorship that have oppressed human rights and civil rights in Iran. I think that we see public opinion polls to the extent that you can hold them in Iran. About 80% of the Iranians want to see a regime change. There are many Iranians living here in the United States who are in exile and want to see a regime change. They want to see democracy coming back to Iran. They want to see people having more freedoms in Iran. Women have more freedoms in Iran. It is up to the Iranian people. I know that the regime is weakened now, and I hope that the Iranian people can get what they need, and that is democracy.
Coming up, Democrats try to impeach President Trump over the Iran strikes. Why one Indiana congressman is co-sponsoring that effort. Welcome back. Congressman Andre Carson is co-sponsoring articles of impeachment against President Donald Trump. This after he initially voted against bringing them up for a floor debate. Some Democrats say Trump's airstrike against Iran was unconstitutional because he did not seek congressional approval. Our Gina Glero spoke with Carson.
Representative Carson, thanks for being here today. Why are you co-sponsoring these articles?
Well, I think the president's actions are unconstitutional and reckless. He has shown that he is unwilling to work with Congress. Article 1 of the Constitution gives Congress the authority to enact wars. Article 2 makes exceptions in the event of exigent circumstances, humanitarian needs, keeping our troops out of harm's way, avoiding an imminent and apparent attack, keeping Americans safe. He has not met that threshold.
Why impeach the president over a single airstrike?
Well, this isn't just about one airstrike. Americans from both parties have agreed we don't need another endless foreign war. His actions did not make our country safer. They put our troops and our national security at risk, and they exceed his authority as president. Our founders set up a very balanced system. They wanted Congress to act as a check on presidential excess and overreach and to prevent a monarchy.
Do you risk reducing the impeachment process due to political theater?
Well, that has been a concern amongst membership, which is why we have been really pushing for the War Powers Resolution, which I'm co-sponsoring, to basically restore the balance of Congress and the executive branch that our founders intended. We have to stop executive overreach. It's now being supported by at least 12 members of Congress who are also military veterans. They understand better than most how dangerous President Trump's actions are for our safety and for our country.
Now, Republicans dismiss the idea as a political stunt. Congressman Marlin Stutzman tells me Trump acted entirely within his authority.
There really is just no basis for them. The Democrats have tried to impeach President Trump before, so this is nothing new. And I think they're just focused on the wrong things. And frankly, I believe that we should be talking about the fact that President Trump took out a nuclear threat, not only to Israel, but to greater parts of the world. And that President Trump also just went to NATO. And he's got the NATO allies, committing to making sure that they're going to put their defense funding at the 5% of GDP in their countries as well. So I'll tell you what, they should be talking about Nobel Peace Prizes rather than impeachment articles.
Should President Trump have briefed Democratic leaders on the strikes ahead of time, as he did with Republicans? Half the Gang of Eight is Democrats.
Well, I don't think so. I think, again, just like the press went after the Trump administration for Signal, and that there was a mistake leak on the Signal chat a couple of months ago with Michael Waltz. I think, again, this is very sensitive information. If the president decides that he's going to put our men and women in harm's way to take out a nuclear facility, that the briefings need to be very limited. I think it's impressive, and I'm very glad for the safety of our men and women in uniform that carried out the mission, that there were no leaks.
So if a Democratic president authorizes a future airstrike and only briefs Democratic members of the Gang of Eight, do you believe your argument still holds?
Absolutely. Again, this has happened before, where Democrat presidents have launched attacks on countries such as Libya or Syria. Obama did that, did those sorts of attacks back during his administration. President Clinton did the same thing. Joe Biden did as well. So this is, do they have to brief Congress? I don't believe they need to, because of their constitutional powers as president.
Coming up, Indiana's best political team on the Iran strike aftermath and the near expulsion of one city-county councilor from the Democratic caucus. Welcome back to All Indiana Politics, as we welcome in two members of Indiana's best political team, Republican Whitley Yates and Democrat Dana Black. Welcome back to the show. Let's begin with the latest between Israel and Iran. Whitley, we have a fragile ceasefire. It looks like the airstrikes last weekend were successful, but we have conflicting intelligence reports. So how do the long-term results affect President Trump's political standing here at home, particularly with Congress?
I think overall, we were very worried about what these strikes would bring and if it would bring peace or more chaos. And we did see a retaliatory measure from Iran. But I will say that he does have the peace treaty that they are both agreeing to. And it may be fragile, but it is foundational to start anew. And so I am glad to see that the actions of President Trump have at least brought them to the table and chartered and created this treaty.
Dana, how much will President Trump's handling of the war between Israel and Iran define the rest of his term? We're still pretty early in it.
Well, it depends on who you ask, but if you ask us Democrats, it's just another lie. He said he wasn't going to get involved in wars that had nothing to do with us. But here we are striking people. Now, this thing between Iran and Israel has been going on for a very long time. We cannot pretend like we didn't have something to do with this previously. But he said he didn't want to get involved. So how does anyone believe anything that this president says?
Dana, are Democrats wasting time and political capital by trying to impeach Trump over these airstrikes?
Yes. I have to, respectfully disagree with my favorite congressman, because honestly, we have seen presidents in the past launch these attacks without congressional approval. Now, what they should lean in on is the fact that he made a promise during the campaign that he was not going to get us into any more forever wars, and that's exactly what he's attempting to do right now. So I don't see the impeachment. They don't have the votes for it. So yes, I think it's a waste of time. That's just me, though.
Whitley, do Democrats have a point in their broader criticisms? Half of the Gang of Eight consists of Democrats.
Absolutely not. I think the Democrats in this case are hypocritical. When Obama launched over 26,000 airstrikes in 2016 alone, that was his final year in office across 7 different countries, and he didn't get any type of approval. And Obama authorized over 50,000 strikes without any type of congressional approval globally during his terms as president. And so when he was launching the airstrikes, they called it leadership. When Trump is launching the airstrike, they called it reckless. And I think what's good for the goose has to be good for the gander. And without new authorizations on both sides, they're doing the exact same thing.
Let's turn to matters much closer to home. On Wednesday, Indianapolis Democrats announced that Councilor Krista Carlino had been removed from committees, but not from their caucus. And this was after she called for the resignation of both Mayor Joe Hogsett and Council President Vop Osley. Dana, how should we read this? And could this dissuade other council members from calling for Hogsett to step down?
No, one has nothing to do with the other. I think the real issue here is that Krista decided that she wanted to say that maybe the investigation wasn't handled correctly, and she called into question the integrity of the council president. You can't do that to your homies without evidence. We talked about this last week. We said she needed to provide proof, and then she came out and said, oh, wait, I didn't have proof. Now, I like Krista, and I hope that she figures out how to manage this, but that it was irresponsible of her to say that maybe that investigation wasn't clear or fair or transparent, or somebody had their finger on the thumb on the scale and not have evidence of that. I wish. Listen, the city county council needs to get their act together. All of this is because Thomas Cooks couldn't keep his hands to himself. All of this other stuff is because men can't seem to leave women alone at the workplace. We need to get our act together here.
Whitley, realistically, to Carlino's assertions, how much control do city officials actually have over an outside investigation? As I alluded to just now, Carlino effectively accused Osley of making the outside investigation too narrow, but then did not further back up that claim.
If you read the IBJ article that really talks about all of this, you'll see that what her committee and the committee that she was over sent as a scope versus what the final scope was very different. And so if the committee didn't choose that scope, the question is who did? And because she was not in the process of choosing the narrow scope, obviously maybe assumed that it was Vop. And I think that is a question that is valid. But what I will say is her being removed from the committees, whether she removed herself or they were going to do it anyway, does seem more like containment and less like accountability. It seems like a slap on the wrist. If you say something we don't like, this is the retribution for you. And I have a problem with them attempting to utilize this as some constructive or restructive method for her. But Thomas Cook didn't get that. Mayor Joe Hogsett hasn't gotten that. And so why is it that we want to punish someone that's looking for accountability like Councilor Carlino, as opposed to those who were in positions of power that helped to perpetrate oppression and victimization on these women?
Whitley, I agree with you 100%, but the council has no control over what Mayor Hogsett did with Thomas Cook. They called for the investigation. I think the real issue is not all this is noise. All the rest of this is noise. If we don't want to deal with the real issue, which is women wanting to go to work and get a paycheck without getting harassed, honestly, Republicans could probably stay out of this conversation.
little Pacers liner. That's right.
Just to be able to protect your skin.
Exactly, exactly. But heck of a game. Heck of a series, and we'll get you next year. There's always next year.
That's the good part. That's the good part. We got a next year. It's 3 months away.
Congrats, friend.
Absolutely. Doesn't he look good? Doesn't he look good? Thunder up, y'all. Good series.
That was Senator Todd Young fulfilling a wager with Oklahoma Senator James Lankford over the results of the NBA Finals. Thank you for joining us for All Indiana Politics. We'll be back here next Sunday morning at 9:30. And be sure to check out the All Indiana Politics podcast online at wishtv.com. Have a great rest of your weekend.
From Wish TV, this is All Indiana Politics Podcast on the All Indiana Podcast Network. Watch All Indiana Politics live Sunday mornings at 9:30 on Wish TV and at wishtv.com. Subscribe to this podcast and listen weekly here on the All Indiana Podcast Network. And be sure to discover even more great podcasts at allindianapodcastnetwork.com.